Radio Raheem here with Eddie Hearn. I'm in London once again thanks to another great card you've put on. We've got Anthony Joshua at the top of that card taking on Dominik Brazil. You know, there's so many fights that are being made. I'm coming over here, it seems like every other week now, which I enjoy. But you seem to be the one promoter that's able to and willing to work with anybody. And now we're hearing there's a rumor of Floyd Mayweather tournament. You're working with him. Can you explain that? What's going on there?
Yeah, that's a conversation I had with Leonard Ellaby and Floyd in Washington, where we're looking to match a lot of our guys, probably a 5-6 fight card against their guys. So we'd look at Rocky Fielding against J. Leon Love, Jamie McDonnell against some of the bantamweight guys. They've got Andrew Tabiti, who is a cruiserweight, could fight Tony Bellew. So just looking at ways to max that up, have like a Mayweather Cup kind of thing. But I work with anyone, I don't really care. And I think there's too many egos in boxing, and it doesn't really exist with me. I've probably got a big ego myself, but in terms of getting the business done and making money, I work with whoever.
Now, you're clearly willing to work with whoever because you're talking about putting on a Joshua Fury fight, even possibly. Obviously, most people have seen the Twitter war. It got really crazy and out of hand. You being a promoter, knowing how to manage fighters and deal with the media, how do you feel about the way Tyson Fury approaches not just the sport, but you personally, with the kind of language he uses and the imagery he conjures?
Yeah, I just think you got to be yourself, and if that's him, that's him. It's people's perception whether that's right or wrong. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't see Tyson Fury as the ideal role model for the sport. I see that as Anthony Joshua, the man who I think young children could genuinely look at and say, I want to be like him. And I think Tyson Fury's achieved a huge amount. I think he's a great fighter, but I just feel like Anthony Joshua is the man to take British boxing forward. But he's got to keep winning. And, people overlook Dominik Brazil. They say, it's an easy defence. It's not an easy defence. This is a guy 6'8". You saw him tonight. He can fight. And he's got a chance to become heavyweight champion of the world. What do you think he's going to do? Turn up and roll over? We've got to get past him. And it's easy to say, what about Fury? What about Hay? What about Brazil on Saturday night? Let's get that dealt with. We've got too much to lose to start taking our eye off the ball.
This is Joshua's first title defense. He hasn't had a huge amount of fights himself, so I think the Brazil fight is a reasonable fight to make. But what is it that Brazil brings to this fight that does make it competitive? Because we've seen a couple of Americans come over here now and not be able to do much. Why would Dominik Brazil be any different?
Well, he has power, and he's dangerous, and he's willing to trade. He's willing to throw. I think he has good footwork. He doesn't have the speed of Anthony Joshua, and if I was him, that's where the big concern's going to be. And also, how is he going to react? I think we saw Charles Martin, while I feel it was a great performance from Anthony Joshua, not wilt, but melt a little bit under the pressure of fight night. He looked very confident all week. He came in a crown and a robe, and when the light shone down and he felt Anthony Joshua's speed and power, he didn't want to know. I think you're going to get more from Dominik Brazil, but I think you're going to get a guy who's prepared to trade. And when you're prepared to trade against a guy with speed and power like Anthony Joshua, it could end badly for you. But you're going to see a great knockout, and I think this fight's going to be all over someone falling like a tree within 6 rounds.
One of the biggest critics of this card is on the card. We saw Dylan White. The first thing that he talked to me about was his shoulder injury.
Yeah.
I covered the fight. I didn't know anything about it, but he claims that you and Joshua did know that he had a shoulder injury going into the fight, and that handicapped him during the fight, so he wants to rematch. Of course, my first question is, was that something that you guys were aware of, that he was going in a little lame?
No, he had a shoulder injury before his fight in September. I don't know the ins and outs of the injury, but I know it affected him in the fight. He told me so, and I believe him. But that fight, it's kind of like everything went out the window. Tactics, technique, even injuries. It was just a shootout, and people loved it, and people want to see it again, and we have no problem doing it again. And you see the fact that Anthony Joshua owns this show, and the fact that he has the input into the people that are on the card. Dylan White's on this card, and Dylan White's Simon Matchroom. So if there was a problem in that respect, it wouldn't be. Because one thing I have to do, as AJ being a heavyweight champion of the world, is give him the courtesy to ask him. And the answer was, great, get him on. It's great, let's build a rematch. That could be a big fight next year. AJ thinks a little bit differently to other people. It's not a case of, no, I don't like him. He said this, he said that. He's not coming on my card. It was a great idea. That'll build things. And that's smart.
On television, we've got something of the same kind of dynamic. Not that they fought before, but we know how television works. We've got Deontay Wilder on Showtime, and now for the first time we've got Anthony Joshua on Showtime. Same card, 2 heavyweights, both title holders, both guys win their fight. It begs the question, is Showtime looking to put this matchup together maybe faster than either camp we're looking for?
Well, we want the unification fights, for sure, and the biggest one of those is Tyson Fury. Deontay Wilder against Anthony Joshua is a huge fight. We want to build Anthony Joshua into a dual pay-per-view fighter. What I mean by that is a pay-per-view fighter in America and in England. That doesn't happen overnight in America. We have to build him on the channel. We have to build his profile over there, perhaps even fight over there. And then we can look at that Deontay Wilder fight, no problem at all.
One fight that you're going to bring over here that's a fighter who's had success there and probably anywhere he goes is Triple G. It surprised a lot of people to know that Eubank was going to be the likely opponent, the next opponent for Triple G, and here at home for you in London. How does that conversation even get started, and how close are we to that conversation being done and me coming out for this press conference?
Well, I think that my instruction from the Eubanks was to make the Golovkin fight. So I do what I do. I work hard and I get fights done, and that fight is almost ready to sign. We have the Doran fight at the weekend, which is a tough fight. You know, people just think it's like a 6-rounder. It's not. It's a 12-round championship fight against a guy who can punch, who's 17-0. So, you know, we have to get through that. But as far as I'm concerned, if the Eubanks really want that fight is there, and that fight can be signed next week.
It seems like Eubanks is another guy, someone like Anthony Joshua. He's clean cut. He's got some charm. You know, he's getting attention early in his career. Why not go through Billy Joe Saunders first, or pace him a little bit before he gets to a guy like Triple G, who, you know, it could hurt him?
Because they feel like they can beat him, and there's a huge amount of money for that fight, and they want to fight the best, and that's the answer.
The last thing, we always have to talk about Amir Khan until we can get Amir Khan in this ring with Kell Brook. You saw your prediction come true. I mean, you were a lot of people called it, but you called it right on the numbers as to how it would go. But before the knockout, we saw some skill, some real skill from Khan. Do you think that kind of boxing ability can still win him championships, and does it give him any kind of edge against Kell Brook?
Not against anyone that can punch. So he has a huge amount of skill. He has a huge amount of speed, but he can't hold a shot against a big puncher. So that's why against Canelo, that's why that was always going to happen. You know, I followed that fight on Twitter. It was after the Crawler fight, actually. And I was in bed and just refreshing it. Round 1, Amir Khan. Round 2, another good round for Khan. And I was just waiting for the one to come up. And it was boom, boom, wow. And I knew what would happen, because it was only a matter of time. And the same thing happens when he fights Kell Brook, but he ain't going to fight Kell Brook, because he couldn't live with himself knowing that Kell Brook had knocked him out. And that's the bottom line. He'd make more money for that fight than he did for the Canelo fight. And it's for the world welterweight title. When are people going to wake up and realise, why would he not want to fight Kell Brook? Not for the money. Not because it's not for a world title fight, because it is. Not because it's a fight that no one's going to be interested in, because it's one of the biggest fights in Britain. The only answer, he doesn't want to lose to Kell Brook. He can lose to Canelo, and everyone goes, well done, mate, you jumped up 2 weights. What a guy. But the fact is, you get knocked out like that, you're never going to be the same. And he's not going to be the same, and he hasn't been the same after all the times he's been knocked out. And it's a dangerous sport, and I think his team have got to look carefully at the decisions they make.
It is a dangerous sport, and the weight divisions he's in are impacted. If he can't fight a guy who can punch, who can he fight? What would you suggest he do?
Look at the guys that he's fought since he got knocked out by Danny Garcia. Carlos Molina, he's a lightweight. Devon Alexander, I mean, completely at the end of his career. So to see him get beat by like a 20-1 shot in his last fight. Collazo, you know, another guy who's a non-puncher. Diaz, who's a non-puncher. He's a lightweight. He knocked him down in Sheffield. Steps up, fights a puncher, gets beat. It's just what's going to happen.
What's going to happen now, though? What can he do now?
Well, he can get knocked out against Danny Garcia, or he can get knocked out against Kell Brook. The answer is he can get knocked out for 3 times as much money. He'd rather get knocked out by Danny Garcia for 3 times less money, because it's not Kell Brook.
Now, I'll tell you a fight that hasn't been a lot of discussion about yet, but I think maybe fight of the year. I'm putting my money down right now that this could be fight of the year, and likely the next time I see you after this week will be in New York. Santa Cruz versus Frampton.
Yeah, good fight.
Looks like a war to me. And you're coming over there to New York to do that one. How do you see that matchup, and who asked for it? How did this fight come about?
Well, that's done with the McGuigans and Cyclone Promotions. I think it's a good fight. I mean, what I admire about Carl Frampton in that fight is he earned a huge amount of money to fight Scott Quigg, and he's taking this fight for much less money. But he wants the big fights, and that's to be applauded. Carl's clever. You know, he doesn't have to go to war against Scott Quigg. He nullified the action really well. He didn't want that war. He wanted to be clever and fight the fight that he believed would guarantee him the win. And it was a close fight in the end. I think Santa Cruz won't let him fight that kind of fight. So ultimately, it's going to be tough for Carl to stand up to Santa Cruz's pressure and power at featherweight. But I see it as a very even fight.
Do you put much stock in what a lot of people will be talking about, which is an American-Mexican fighter with that Mexican style, like you say, a lot of pressure coming forward, putting the heat on Frampton? What does he have to do to counter that, and can he counter that? How much stock do you actually put in that style?
I think because of the fight being in America, I think because of Santa Cruz's style, I think Frampton's going to have to need a knockout or a stoppage to win that fight.
Saturday night at the O2 Arena, June 25th, another great card. We've got Anthony Joshua facing Dominik Brazil. Eddie Hearn, thank you again for the time.
Cheers,
Love to come out and see your cards. Here we go again.